Okay.
Perfect. Well, hello, happy sunny Monday, all, and thanks for being here today. We have a lot to kind of go through today, a great presentation that we're very, very thankful to have Tom Cheney join us for and share his expertise and knowledge of where they stand today. And then we want to end the day with kind of jumping into a credential of value conversation. Before we do that, we are also welcomed by some members who have joined our committee outside of workforce board members. So really quickly, I think we'll just go around, introduce who you are, your pronouns, and where you are from, and then we can just jump right into our presentation. Once you've gone, just select another person and we'll hopefully get through everybody fairly quickly. But I am Ronnie Baston, she, her pronouns with Vermont Works for Women, and I am supporting Drake and Sabina in working with Goal Committee 2. And I will pass it over to Bill Cunningham.
Thank you, Bill Cunningham, Regional Director of Tri-Valley Transit in Middlebury, Vermont. I'll pass it to Betsy Bailey.
Hi, Betsy Bailey, Little Dippers Doodle in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, Child Care Center. And I'll pass it to Allison Clarkson.
Oh, Allison Clarkson, Chair, Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, survivor of crossover, and I will pass it to Tom Cheney.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tom Cheney, and I will share a little bit more about the work that we do at Advanced Vermont shortly. Glad to join you all today. Oh, sorry, Tiffany.
Thanks, Tom. Good to see you here. I'm Tiffany Walker, and I oversee workforce for the Vermont State Colleges. I use she, her pronouns, and I will hand it to Rob. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Tiffany. Rob Bonney from Southwest Tech in Bennington. I oversee adult technical education here.
And we'll pop over to Aaron Tomlinson.
Hey, everybody. Aaron Tomlinson, Assistant Superintendent for the Hartford School District, and I will pass it to Ethan.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Ethan Maurer, Skill Tech Program Coordinator at the Center for Technology in Essex, the adult ed and continuing technical training program there. And I'll pass it over to David Justice.
Good to see you, Ethan. Hi, everybody. David Justice, Associate Director with Vermont Adult Learning. We are one of the state's 4 providers of adult ed and literacy, and we also have some workforce training programs that will be relevant to this conversation. I'll pass it on to Jay.
Hello, everyone. Jay Ramsey, Director of Workforce Development at the Department of Labor. Gonna toss it over to Mark.
Mark Desereau, President of Desereau Machines in Berlin, Vermont. We do precision machining and fabrication, and happy to be here. I think that's it, right? Is there anyone else?
I'll pass it over to Kate next to me, who I should have done that originally.
Hi, everyone. Kate Glackman, Director of Development and Communication at VWW. Use she, her pronouns.
And I do think that is everybody. Big thank you to those outside of the board that have joined us and helped with these conversations and our committee work. We appreciate your time in being a part of this work. I think Drake will pass it over to you for just approval of minutes.
Sure. And I didn't introduce myself, but I think everyone knows who I am. Drake Turner, Deputy Director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. And we're so excited to have 3 new members of the committee. So David, Ethan, Rob, glad to have you join us. It's I think going to be really great to have the adult CTE and adult education and literacy perspective on this committee. So thank you. It's a lot to take on another thing, and we appreciate it.
So Rob, can I just, Rob, you're Bennington CTE Director, is that right?
Yeah, adult CTE at Southwest Tech.
Oh,
in Bennington.
Adult CTE. Okay.
Right.
And is that one of our well-integrated adult and CTE programs?
Yes.
Ah, good. Great. And just to start clarifying, Aaron, are you the assistant superintendent of all of the Hartford school system?
Yes, I am. So
so you're the steady state as we have sort of a rocky transition to new leadership for the superintendent.
Oh, it's yeah, it's good stuff. And
Okay.
when I became part of the board, I was similar to Ethan and Rob in adult CTE and part of CTE. So that was where I originally got on the board.
Right. Apologies for not having met you last Monday night. I was in transition from coming from out of country back to the US at the time of that meeting.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So now that this is our second meeting, we got to start approving minutes from previous meetings. So Ronnie, do you want me to handle it, or do you want to take the lead? I'm happy to do it whichever way.
Why don't we start with you being more efficient, and then next time I'll steal it back from you. Yeah.
Okay. As long as that still counts if I call for the vote. So we linked the minutes from the February 16th meeting in the agenda. Hopefully folks had a chance to review those. And for folks who weren't here, it's all right if you want to abstain. But we would entertain if anyone has a motion to approve those minutes.
I'd approve those minutes as circulated.
Second?
Approve the minutes as circulated.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, great. I think that's the first time I've actually done that. That's so funny. It's my own professional development. All right, great. Thanks. I'll pass it back to you, Ronnie.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it right over to Tom Cheney, who's going to share more on the work that he and his team have been working on, and more of what's ahead as well. And I just want to preface this that at our last meeting, a big discussion was looking at a gap analysis and potentially what would be needed to perform a gap analysis. Before I thought we go all the way down that road of finding a way and what gaps are we looking for, getting an idea of what we already have. And I think Tom and his team have really started a great inventory of programs, and the work that they're doing really lends to the work that our committee has outlined. So I think this is going to give us a great foundation to then better ask, what do we need to be doing next? So Tom, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thanks. And great to see so many people. Some of you could actually give this presentation, I think. So I will try to keep it brief and also happy to answer questions along the way. So feel free to just jump in. I'm not going to have a slide deck, but I will show you my future VT shortly through a screen share, which it looks like I'm able to do. So for starters, for those of you who don't know Advance Vermont and me, I'm the executive director of Advance Vermont, and we're a little teeny tiny statewide nonprofit that's been around since 2017 or so. And our vision really is around making sure that there's a Vermont where every student graduates with a clear, actionable plan for their next steps, and that every adult can confidently navigate opportunities for learning and work throughout their career. Our work at Advance Vermont really is around ensuring that Vermonters have the knowledge, guidance, tools that they need to pursue that plan or to re-engage in that career and education hunt throughout your career. Our work is kind of built on this foundation that we live in a system, not just in Vermont, but nationwide, that relies on school counselors to really be the sole owner of career and education exploration and planning in our schools. And that we don't have a really comprehensive system for what we call career navigation in our schools, or even wider than that for adults. We have a lot of great players doing really incredible work, but what we're trying to do is to ensure that everyone has the resources, information, tools they need to fulfill their role within this system. And there's a lot of players on this call today who have their hands in this in really meaningful ways. Some of you who are leaders in building this system and sustaining this system. So thanks for that work. Our role is around making sure that folks have that information, they understand their role, as I said. So we have My Future VT, which we'll talk about in a second, but this other work is more youth oriented for now, though I think it has, a wider view towards adults as well going forward, but it's around making sure that those who support people in their career and education planning have that information they need to be effective, and that we're not just thinking about it as like the school counselors or the career coaches, but we're also thinking about the network that surrounds people and ensuring that they understand their role and their place kind of within the system and help the people they're serving to connect to the dots through various different resources. So with Graduate with a Plan is our program. We work in high schools and organizations that serve youth, including employers across the state. It's a new initiative, and we do two main things. One is professional development to make sure that folks understand their roles. And then second is we're really laying out a career and education planning framework. So, or you call them learning standards, competencies. And then backing that up with the information and activities that these adults can use to help integrate career and education planning into the school day and into their organizations more meaningfully and impactfully. So I'll leave that there because that's a different day and a different committee. Want to talk about My Future VT, so happy to jump into that if you're all ready. Please feel free to go to myfuturevt.org and follow along. I think the internet's good enough here that I'm going to actually steer you live, and apologies if it does inevitably slow down at some point. So My Future VT is a career and education planning platform that's free for Vermonters. We built this and launched it about 5 years ago, just under 5 years ago. And the role that it's playing is making sure there's a comprehensive resource for youth and adults and those who support them to come to gain information about careers, education, training opportunities, and then the different support services that are out there. This came after years of talking to practitioners saying, we don't have one place to go for information. We've got a lot of great assets and resources and programs in the state. We just really don't know how to access them. And there's certainly not one place where we can get all of that information. So when you're on the homepage here, you can see that we really try to make it accessible. You can say, I want to know more about careers, and you kind of do a couple questions to get you to a particular page that might be useful to you. We're not going to do that right now because I want to be a little more prescriptive in what we do. We have a blog that has a lot of useful information, updated programs and little tidbits that are helpful for folks. And then we feature careers on this homepage. I should note before I go any further that this site is designed to be mobile friendly. It is designed for disadvantaged populations. It is designed to be at 8th grade reading level or below for Vermonters, so that really this can be accessible for folks. So if you were to explore this, you could do it in a lot of different ways, but we'll just take you through kind of a linear left to right progression. So if I'm a career and education seeker, I'm trying to figure out what career might I want to do. I could take a career interest quiz or personality test. I could explore path, learn a little bit more about service learning or about how to do a job shadow and how can I explore my opportunities. And then we have links to job boards and also different ways that you can, get connected to jobs. So I'm going to take you here, and this is our database for careers. And so we'd use Vermont Department of Labor information and have the top 550 careers in the state. We take a look at, or we actually flag the most promising jobs, which the Vermont Department of Labor and the McClure Foundation have a long-standing partnership of identifying what those jobs are and putting a great brochure out. We have the electronic form by flagging those careers here. So let's go into a career. Get in here, you get a little information about a career. What does it pay? What are the projected openings? What does it take in terms of skills? And then what's the level of education that's generally required? It's not perfect, but this is what ONET tends to tell us. And then you can actually take a look and see what are those education opportunities in the state that will help me access this career. So that's generally what you see on this page, and you can actually link over those education programs. I'll show those to you in a minute. Go back to the grid. In this grid, you can filter. So you can search by, if you took that interest quiz, you can actually search by what was spit out as your key interest. So maybe I'm conventional, or I'm creative, or I'm enterprising. But you could also say, I know I need a certain wage, I have certain skills, etc. So that's that section of the site. Please feel free to jump in. The second piece is around finding education, right? So we start by just saying, what are the different types of education available to Vermonters? And so we try to make it as accessible as possible by saying, hey, we've got certificates, registered apprenticeships, associate degrees, bachelor degrees, certifications. And then we also have a video so that folks can access it in that way as well. Learn about what are the opportunities in high school, what are ways to finish high school, etc. We have some information about how to pay for education and training as well. A lot of that gets you straight back over to VSAC, who are the real pros, but we need to have that information here as well so that folks get a little bit of a taste of what those options are before we send them off for more information. So this is a database of the education and training programs available in the state. This is the vast majority of post-high school education and training programs. This includes CTE because you're earning post-high school credentials. So all of these programs lead to some sort of piece of paper after high school. And we'll be talking about the credential value thing a little bit later, but we're using a working definition that the state created a number of years ago to basically try to verify that these are all what we would consider credentials of value based on that definition. So you work in here, similar way, you can filter by the different credential type, by where it's offered, kind of industry that it might be attached to or prepare you for, etc. Let's just go into this one at Riverbend Tech Center. Come right in here, you get a description. We work with the provider to make sure that all of this information is accurate. So it's a very time-intensive, labor-intensive process. It takes easily 6 months from start to finish to have conversations with each organization before they finally, approve this material. All of this has been approved by them to ensure that it is up to date and accurate. So we worked with Riverbend, and this is the description that we worked with them to create. Here's all the key information. It's a certificate program. It's in person. There are no prerequisites. Go down the list. Talk about what the cost is, and then push you back to the different careers and industries that it is associated with. You can link to a program website and be directed directly to the latest and greatest information and resources they have about that particular credential. So there is no other place in Vermont where you will find this information. There's no Excel spreadsheet somewhere. We are the only entity that I believe has ever done a comprehensive look at what the education and training programs post-high school are available in the state of Vermont. And so we're at almost 950. We're constantly adding to that. We have a couple more colleges to add, but other than that, we have virtually everything up here, and it is updated on an annual basis. The last section of the site is around just understanding where you can get more support. So we have some information and resources for different age groups. So resources for adult learners, and kind of get a little bit of the 101, or what are some of the reasons why you might want to consider education and training, or the perks of a promising career, and then direct them to some of the information that might be helpful for them if they're thinking about a career change or starting to upskill a little bit. Because we have a database in each section of the site, we ought to have another one. So this is another, I think, unique data set, which is the education and career services that are available in the state. So everything from Vermont Works for Women to Hireability, the Department of Labor, AALV, as you see at the top of this page. We have 138 different programs that we've identified as supporting people through their career and education journey. We have a filter here where you can search by audience. So this might be adult programs or for people of color, et cetera. So you can narrow it down based on the population you're serving or the population that you identify with. We can also say, I need this type of support. So I want to narrow it down to this, or I'm in this service area. And I might need it in this type of format, one-on-one. I'm looking for one-on-one support. I'm working for a program or online resource. So when you click into these, we'll go to the Department of Labor, and you can see, hey, this is what the Department of Labor does around workforce development. Really quick, because we want to drive users to that particular site really quickly. Hope I got this right, Jay. So that's in essence the key pieces of the site that I wanted to share with you today. A thing just to note for your kind of understanding of the Workforce Development Board and the obligations of the state and of the Office of Workforce Development is that Act 65 was passed last year, and it requires the state to actually publish a list like this of these support services, but also of the education and training programs available in the state. So those are two things we've already done and will continue to do as long as we are able. We work really closely with Jay and his team and with Drake and Sabina at the Office of Workforce Development and the Agency of Education to make sure this data is up to date and that is as supportive and as connected to the state as can be. So I think that's basically it. Drake, Ronnie, anything else you want me to note?
No,
Any questions?
Yeah, any immediate questions?
How many, Tom, it's so exciting to have watched you from the beginning. So I just want to say, I feel like a parent. Well, I am a parent, but on this, it's really exciting to see you having taken this idea and grown it to the point where it is. How many people are using it? How many people have actively used it? How many people have you got comments from that say this was life-changing or this was really helpful? So can you give us a notion of the use, its useful to you?
Yeah, thanks for teeing me up for this question, because something I probably should have mentioned before. So we've had in the neighborhood of probably 150 to 160 unique visitors and users to the site in the last 5 years. So it's a pretty high number. We did a pretty comprehensive evaluation of the site a couple of years ago, where we asked users, how's it going? And basically any question you put at them was the 9 out of 10 positive. So does it have a good look and feel? Does it have the information that you need? Yes. Is it easy to navigate? Yes. And then we said, well, did it lead to an outcome for you? And this is actually where I was surprised by the response that we got. Again, 9 out of 10 said it led to an outcome. So I used the site, then I did something because of it. Now, it might be I have a better sense of my plan, which is great. Or sizable numbers said I applied for a job or I applied for an education program. So we're seeing that a tool like this is really a critical piece for youth and adults. It's not the only thing you need as you're pursuing your career and education trajectory, but having a resource, comprehensive resource like this, we're finding not just in Vermont, but nationally is a pretty essential piece of the system now. So yeah, it's going well. And when you talk anecdotally to folks, they say, this is really what we've been waiting for, and it's really essential that this continues. And when you think about who are the users and kind of champions for this, you would talk to a school counselor, you might talk to a VSAC counselor working out in schools. I know that Jay's team uses this, Hireability uses this tool. So a lot of the practitioners have adopted the use of this tool with their clients or their youth or their adults, and has had a pretty meaningful impact.
Right. And how are you marketing it now? I mean, I know Jay is using, and I know the people that you've just listed are using it, but how would a random adult in need of this know about you?
So we do Google search. So we do have some ad dollars up. We have a very, very small marketing budget. We are a teeny tiny nonprofit. So we have a very small marketing budget that does push it out electronically through Google Ads. And then we're out to every place we can be to get in front of adults serving or youth serving adults, adult serving adults, and everyone in between to make sure that this is being adapted and adopted, I should say, across the state. We could do more, for sure, but have limited funds to do that. Yeah. But I'll tell you, one of the things that I'll know, and I'm forgetting the stats, but we're really starting to track organic usage of the site. So in other words, how are people finding the site? And what we're finding is that actually year on year, more and more organizations are sending people there. So it's on their website or it's part of their curriculum. And we can actually see people funneling here through organic traffic, which is a pretty big deal and an indicator that adoption is taking place on a pretty big scale.
Tom, a quick question for you back to, and this might be too detailed, but just out of curiosity, you said that this site helps meet Act 65 in the inventory of programs. Is it fully meeting that requirement that you know of?
The way that I read the law, I think so.
Okay.
I haven't read it for a hot second, but I think
Yeah,
my answer would
I
be
don't read it.
probably, and I defer to Jay or to Drake, who also have a handle on what the law says, but I think it would be pretty darn close.
And I only ask because as this committee looks as the charge of making sure that there is an inventory of programs for Vermonters to re-engage in, kind of making sure that we're first meeting that need before looking into Act 80 with credentials of value. So Jay or Drake, would you agree, or are there pieces of this that like I know there's a lot of new work with Department of Labor and some new initiatives around pre-apprenticeship programming that, you know, have opportunities within this as well. But from your perspective, this is meeting the inventory of programs kind of requirement within the act?
It's a good question. And I don't know, Jay's been sort of more, has more history and context around this than I do. So I don't know, Jay, if you have any insights here, but the fulfilling that component of the office's like statutory obligations is something that we've been talking about. That's a big lift, right? I think we can definitely hear that from Tom. And there's a reason that this is something that hasn't existed for 20 years, because it takes a lot of time and effort to compile all of that. So Sabina and I have been in conversation with our colleagues at the Department of Labor, with Tom and his team, about with the legislature, about figuring out how we fulfill that obligation, and certainly we want to avoid duplicating work that's already been done. But Jay, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
I think what one of the intents that the legislature had was an inventory of all the training programs, which includes programs that agencies and departments operate. And those aren't things that necessarily are showing up on Advanced Vermont's website. They do show up on the Excel sheet that Drake has been working on spearheading across state government. And so that's sort of not included in the list. Service programs, I don't think show up on the list. Pre-apprenticeships aren't on the list as far as I have seen yet. Apprenticeship programs are not on the list as I have seen them yet, but so those are things that have been receiving more attention over the last few years and have been developing and growing. And they're on our website, but they're not in Tom's database. And then I'll add the Department of Labor runs the Vermont Job Link, which has a training provider search tool, but that for right now is the limited purpose of what training programs can we use our WIOA funds on to support vulnerable populations. And we have a lot of training providers that are from out of state, that are virtual, that also don't show up on Advanced Vermont's list, which is really about Vermont providers. So we know that our listing needs to be a little bit more expansive, and until we get to a place where it can be more expansive, Advanced Vermont's tool serves that purpose.
Got it. So maybe not gaps in the system, but just gaps in how people can access the information. It's there publicly to be accessed, but just multiple places to find it right now, potentially.
And
well, it sounds like two key places, Labor and Advanced Vermont.
I might add another gap would be, do we have training listed on any site across the sites that were just named that fills, that addresses one of the 5 priority sectors identified by the board? So I'm going to just say are there any culinary trainings listed on any of these websites? Just for an example, and to make Allison smile, are there, like in manufacturing, are there gaps in manufacturing trainings? And I'm going to say across all of them, I think there are gaps in those sectors. So that would be another type of gap analysis that I think needs to be done.
And I think that's been that, at least from my perspective in this role, my understanding is a lot of the impetus behind including that language in statute is to use, like, there are a couple of different ways that these tools can be used, right? Like the My Future VT certainly is incredibly user friendly. It's helpful for, job seekers and young folks or folks of all ages to be able to learn more about what's available to them to meet their career goals. But there's also a use for I think policymakers, administration officials, community partners to be leveraging that information to, I think, to Jay's point, figure out what is the coverage across the state of different types of workforce education and training programs, addressing certain types of careers, critical sectors, how is the board using this information to inform priorities and policy decisions and funding decisions. And I know that is something that, I've heard over and over from Allison and Mike of really wanting to, it's hard to make informed choices when you don't have a sense of what already exists and what is needed. So I think the sort of like user experience and increasing access to this information among Vermonters, but then also our sort of like internal use of that information to guide workforce activities is, I think, equally important for all these different types of resources.
And if I can just build on that, so yes, the Department of Labor is concerned about job seekers, but we're also supporting employers and business and industry. And as they look to build training programs or send people to a training, it's important to have a comprehensive database that we can either point employers to or that we can point other training providers to so that they can knit something together. And that is a piece that I hear about frequently from employers as, like, I only know my business and I'm not in the business of workforce development, so why can't you just bring me something that's ready to go? And these tools help us be able to do that.
Right. So kind of blending them. And if we were to look at, Jay, going back to your point about the gaps in certain industries, knowing that there's, we're not doing a full gap analysis of what doesn't exist, but that there's just pockets of it that doesn't exist. As a charge, kind of focusing on key industries in Vermont right now might seem more tangible than looking across the entire list of programs and careers that are there. Does that seem like a place that's both supportive of the work that Tom's team is doing, but also supports Department of Labor and kind of what you're hearing?
And supports the full board, as this committee says, we've identified gaps in these sectors in training, and we're recommending the full board take some action. And then that helps the board and the department be able to go to the governor's office and to the General Assembly to say, we need funds to develop this sort of thing. And that helps us not duplicate effort. It raises awareness of some of the issues that are out there that are getting in our way. All of those things that this committee can help feed the information up from a policy perspective, as Drake is sort of pointing out.
If I could just add, I agree with everything that's been said, and I appreciate Jay and Drake noting that we don't have all the information on the site. We would love to have it all, and so in fact we have a meeting. Jay, you may not know about this, but I have a meeting with VDOL next week to make sure that we're getting the registered apprenticeship information up on the site, and certainly want to talk about pre-apprenticeship as well. But yeah, we'd love to have as much as we possibly could here, and we're working and adding each day. And I really do just wanted to note that because I didn't mention it myself, the value of this data set that we have combined with some of the other data sets that Jay and Drake were mentioning as well, is that when taken together, can be a really powerful tool, not just for the job seekers, as you see in My Future VT, it's really presented in that way, but for all these other players, from policymakers to employers to the providers themselves. so that you can understand what's out there and where those gaps are.
Aaron, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Tom, do you have a sense of how much or how far this information has pushed into schools? The reason I ask is I know this is awesome for tech centers, but I'm thinking even lower level than that is a lot of junior highs do start a lot of career exploration around that time. And this would be, I mean, I certainly am going to push more of this out to some of our, but like school counselors, junior highs, that kind of stuff. This information would be great. And I think like the over time of building this into kind of that practice and education could be super advantageous as we want to try to keep as many young people in the state as possible.
Yes. Yes, and yes, yes. We're doing as much with middle school and middle school as we can, given our capacity. And this program I talked about at the beginning on Graduate with a Plan is really around helping schools to be more purposeful. So we're using tools like My Future VT, but just generally making sure this work is embedded into the school day, and even the greater school community is a big part of our work right now. Yeah.
Great.
Ethan, go ahead.
I just wanted to add into the idea, and it's not maybe pertinent to this group, but Act 77 and flexible pathways, the My Future VT platform, in terms of pushing it into schools, could be a really major add to the system, and not just as Aaron said, for middle school, but also for high school planning, and that is a state requirement. So it could be something to think about in other circles.
Yeah. This is extremely helpful, Tom. Thank you for going through all of that and for filling gaps. Any other quick questions on inventory of programs? I just want to keep us on time to move into the next phase. But any other questions around the inventory of programs, My Future VT or for Tom specifically? And I'm sure you can easily find Tom if more questions come up as more work comes out too.
It just sounds like at the moment, we have a pretty complete inventory between Tom and Jay, between Vidal, Jay, and the office. And it would just be great to have that the complete inventory by sector with Tom, with Jay, and with Drake. I mean, so that there are 3 places people can really see the whole picture of what's available.
Of how to even access all 3 too. Yes, I think that's a great kind of segue too.
So before we jump, sorry to, yes. I do just want to note that I love that we're incorporating the like priority sector sort of lens in this conversation, and just will also note that there is a committee focused on that goal, and workflows are going to overlap. So I think we'll do what we need to do to make sure that those conversations are not jumping all over each other, but are really harmonious and coordinated. So Commissioner Smith is chairing the Goal 1 committee around increasing the supply of workers in key sectors. And I think just for you all to know, the way that they're proposing kind of moving that work forward is taking 1 sector per meeting. Again, doing somewhat similarly to what y'all are doing, is figuring out what has already been done over the years to figure out like what strategies are going to move the needle in specific sectors. So I think making sure that these 2 committees are working in tandem will be really important, and we can think about ways to do that moving forward.
Well, and Drake, I think that's really helpful, because a big difference between 2 of them that would be great is our group is looking at specifically what are these inventories of programs and how are we defining these credentials of value to help these in-demand industries. What would be great, though, I think for our group to focus on is looking at each of those. And, Jay, I think you kind of listed some. What are the gaps in what we don't know? What are those community training partners? What are those pre-apprenticeship pathways? What are some of those potentially employer trainings that we don't know of right now? And just filling that gap rather than, they're doing a majority of the work as far as how to try to get workers in there. I think our task here is how do we make sure workers are connected to the resources that are available in Vermont? Okay. Oh, Jay, go ahead. I was going to pick on you on the next one too.
This will probably bleed over into the next one, but I think it's also important to, since I'm the only person, well, maybe some of the adult ed providers, David, we have federal requirements around credentials as outcomes that have to do with accountability. So that always has to be kind of part of the mix. So I probably would have been a terrible administrator if I hadn't mentioned that. So I'll stop talking about it now.
No, I think you have to keep us on track with that too, and make sure we're meeting your job requirements. So yeah, I think that's great to bring up and keep aligned. So next, what I want to jump into, and not to jump too far from inventory of programs, but really to get a lay of the land of we have a strong foundation with these inventory of programs. And so spinning the wheels on our committee time really feels a value in looking at how do these credentials of value fit into that inventory of programs and add support to really helping making sure Vermonters are re-engaging into careers and the workforce. What I'd like to start with, and Jay, I do apologize to kick it over to you. Drake had sent out some amazing resources that if you were able to read ahead before our meeting today, really help set the stage of what's already been done by the previous workforce board and what the Department of Labor has also worked on around credentials of value and the definition. On page 24 of that strategic plan, they really go into very specific timelines of when they will set definitions, when these training and credentialing committees will take place, what that approval process looks like, and how it integrates with the board. I would love, Jay, if you could give us a quick, where are we now with what's been done? I know that by 2025, there was a pretty strong standard for a definition and for no less than 70% of working age Vermonters to hold a credential of value. So I think my curiosity is, one, do we have a standardized definition that we feel is recognized across? And where has the work been left off based on some of these timelines for the board to jump in, or this committee to jump in?
Okay, well, I'm gonna start with the time machine, going back to this memo that the training and credentialing work group issued to the board. And it looks like this. I've got writing all over it, but it was written in May 2019. If you all might remember, some things happened in 2019. Or was it 2020? I don't know. It was a while ago. So the problem that the board was trying to solve, I think, started with a desire to consolidate definitions and have a common understanding across the workforce development system of what a credential, what is an industry recognized credential, and what counts as a credential of value. So this group of 10 people met multiple times. Tom participated in those meetings. Thank you, Tom. There are probably some other folks that participated that were not listed as members of the committee. But it was I think, an inclusive process trying to get to what is a credential of value, what is the role of the training and credentialing committee of the board, what should it be, and then essentially trying to establish some governance of this system, which other states that I talked to about it called the wild, wild west of credentials and certificates. So what we made these recommendations. The board said, thank you very much. We're establishing this committee. And then the committee met twice and tried to do a bunch of wordsmithing about what the definitions were, and then they stopped meeting. So in terms of what happened to the recommendations in this memo, not a lot. I think some entities, as Tom is saying, adopted the definition and moved, that informed their work and created a North Star for them. But nothing really has happened as far as I could tell along the way. This was when I was working at the Agency of Education. So the agency as I look back, maintains a process for the tech centers and their secondary CTE programs to have credentials recognized for accountability. They established a 2-tier process. Tier 1 credentials, you can find those on their website. I can put them in the chat after I stop talking. Tier 1 credentials are for the tech center programs to be able to have instructors want to teach students about certain things, but employers don't recognize those certificates as meaningful. So the Tier 1 still allows the tech centers to use those credentials. Tier 2 credentials are the more meaningful ones, the ones that take longer to get, the ones that students have to put effort into, and they're the ones that employers have said, yes, we recognize this and we value it, and we value it by guaranteeing an interview or giving someone a wage increase, or there are certain ways that an employer could recognize those credentials. So the agency still manages this process. And that informs their accountability for the Perkins grants. The rest of the system doesn't really have that sort of guidepost or that structure. So what the committee was recommending to the board was, can the Agency of Education and the Department of Labor co-manage this process so that any workforce program, whether it's a workforce program through Vermont Works for Women or Vermont Adult Learning or any of the CTE centers and their adult CTE, that they're going to put a request in for a review of this credential and some endorsement from employers, so that we're maintaining a master list of credentials that have value. And then that would be useful to job seekers. And it would also be useful to training providers to be able to say, oh, the board says this credential is important. Let's design a training program that culminates in this credential, is really the intended use of that structure.
That all makes great sense. And when working, it sounds like a perfect system right there. I'd be curious from the employers that are on the committee, how many have engaged with any of these credential conversations, and what would that look like engaging with the training? And I'm assuming the committee doesn't exist right now, as far as you know, Jay, the TCC committee.
This all went on pause when the board went on pause. Yeah.
Yeah. I would just be curious if any employers have input on how they've engaged kind of in these credentials of value. Because I know as a training partner, I think it's great to create credentials that people can stack and use, but if employers aren't recognizing them, I think we're missing a mark at some point in there. And so I would just be curious if any of the employers who are on here, or even some of our adult learning or CTE centers, have engaged in this in the past. Or if not at all, that might answer our question too.
I would say that, like Jay mentioned, I've been involved in this from the beginning, and there has not really been heavy employer engagement yet because we haven't gotten to that process yet. I think really waiting to say, okay, what is the state's process and procedure? What are the objectives here? And then that's where employers would engage outside of this committee, and employers that this committee or say the board would be involved for sure. But there has not kind of been that level of depth brought to this work yet.
Okay.
And I would just also point folks to the goal document that sort of is underpinning the work of this committee, or that we've all been in conversation about, how y'all want to move forward. The second strategy in that goal 2 document is really focused on the credentials of value to establish and promote them. Because I think, it's great to hear that Advanced Vermont has been using that definition, that there was progress made on. So there is a good body of work that's been done on this issue. And I think what this committee has the opportunity to do, if there's, interest and energy around it, is sort of take like the run the last 10 yards of, establishing that definition, taking a deeper look at the process that was proposed by the folks who've been engaged in this work previously, and then do that, employer engagement, the work with training providers. Like there's more to do to make this really operational. The board has a role to play, and I'm seeing in the goal document, one of the bullets is partnering with employers and business associations to validate, update, and promote the list of priority credentials. And there's like a big opportunity to create a pretty comprehensive and useful system here for all those populations that Jay mentioned. And, I think it's something that based on the previous meeting, sounded that folks were interested in, this sort of like inventory gap analysis piece and the credentials of value piece. So we wanted to bring some of those historical materials to you all, just because so much work has been done, to see, how that landed for folks. And Rob, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think that, credentials of value are really dependent on what employers want. So I think we should probably not spend too much time on credentials until we hear from the employers whether they actually want these things or not, right? When I talk to manufacturers down here, they want people to show up to work, and stay for the whole day, and be on time, things like that. So, those sort of bottom of the pyramid needs are, at least when I talk to employers, are superseding that they have this one particular credential that they get from the tech center. Like they'll train them once they get there. They just need to come to work. And so I think we should really, I don't know how many employers we have on this call, but I think a pretty wide swath of them needs to be surveyed or talked to or whatever, to see if they really want all these credentials of value or not. It's nice that we can offer them, but if they're only of value to half the people seeking the jobs and not really of people who are employing them, that begs the question of what kind of conversation do we need to have about them, right? Yeah. Because on the educational side, they're gold, right? That's what we have to do, right? We have to get the state licenses and the IRCs and all that kind of stuff. But I'd just be interested to hear what the employers have to say about that.
Well, and I think, Rob, that's a great point. That's where my head was going, in the sense of, it seems like there's a lot of work done, maybe on the educational side of it, but the employer voice and really bridging that connection is where I'm curious if that is where this committee can be better suited to. How do the credentials of value that we already have, and some of the definitions, maybe not that it's widely used, but the central definition doesn't seem that, I doubt it differentiates that much from place to place, that are employers still seeing these with the same value, and how are we bridging that connection between them? Jay, sorry.
Nope, no problem. I agree with what Rob is saying also about what employers are telling him. In a labor market that is very tight, employers just want to be able to hire people and they will train them. If the economy shifts and there are more people looking for jobs than there are jobs, credentials are a way of separating out people with skills versus people who don't have skills. The second point that I want to make, for the programs that the state is administering that are federally funded, credentials are a proxy for a skill set, and they are part of our performance metrics. So while we have employers who may be saying, just send us people who can show up and do the work, and that's great, we do have job seekers who have many barriers to employment that employers don't want to hire. We use credentials as a way to show an employer that this person can commit to the time and effort and energy of going through the training, getting a credential. And the tool that the department has, and some of our other workforce programs have, is a paid work experience. We'll take this person who has this credential and place them with you for a little while and pay the wages, and then we can transition them to your payroll employer. And it helps to build that consistent work history that employers are looking for, that often gets in the way of them considering a job seeker. So that's also part of the mix here too.
I want to
I-
recognize, oh, go ahead.
Was it okay if I just added, I think you mentioned this, Ronnie, this is a national conversation that's happening. So we are not the only state that's going through this and having this exact conversation. In fact, we're about 5 years behind. So there's been a lot of progress. I shouldn't say necessarily behind, but folks that are advanced, because they've been working on this over the last number of years when we've kind of taken a pause. And so there is a real opportunity to take a look at what other states are doing right now to catch up, both in terms of definition and maybe some of the process that a state might go through, and maybe even some data sources and validators that might be out there in the ecosystem.
Well, and that's a great segue. We have a couple of minutes left. And so I think what we're really finding is that our next meeting will focus on this credential of values conversation. But what might be helpful in the meantime, and I will work with Drake and Jay and Tom as well, to kind of gather some of those resources that are both national, what have other states done that Vermont can potentially look to implement or start to recommend? And how can this committee really move a couple yards ahead? I don't know if we'll make it the full 10 yards, Drake, but we'll try. But how do we move it a couple yards ahead of where it was last time, and really start to get more employers in the conversation? I think that's a great charge of this committee and overlaps a lot with, I think, what other committees are talking about and doing as well. Any other questions or comments before we kind of look to next steps?
I just would like to comment on Rob. I think it was Rob. Yes, Rob. I think there needs to be clearly a basic credential of value of just workforce readiness, that someone is ready for the workforce, ready to show up on time, ready to dress in a civilized fashion, ready to be whatever it entails. But to go to, I've heard time and time again, that's what, that's like a basic. Maybe we need a credential of just basic workforce readiness as a starter.
Yeah, we had that at one time, I believe, through CCV.
Did we?
That'll be tier 0, and then we'll get to tier 1
Yes.
and 2 and move our way up.
Yeah, exactly.
We have the workforce readiness, both the governor's workforce readiness and the national workforce readiness certificate. They're very difficult because no one wants to pay for it. The thought process is that people should be at that level already. So why should a business pay for it? Is their piece. Green Mountain Coffee did it for a very long time. But then in the other states, the state paid for it, and they got frustrated in Vermont because they were paying for it here. And so over time, it's very difficult to get a credential that is specific to the work and the skill set of that work to be paid for.
Unless it was just a basic thing that you got when you graduated from your CTE center as a student. I mean, it may just be a basic thing that the ed system pays for that you get.
They are using work keys. Jay, are they still using work keys?
Yes.
Yep. So they do have the National Career Readiness Certificate embedded, but the soft skills, which is what the state certificate had through the governor, is not part of that.
Maybe it could be.
Well, and the curiosity is, what does that look like, and can that be incorporated not only in education spaces, but community training partner spaces as well?
Exactly.
But Tiffany, that's a great point. I think cost to everything is what tends to be the challenge in moving anything forward. So, but that's where this committee potentially can make a strong recommendation for something. So I also want to thank everyone for being here. We're right on time. I will work with Drake to get our next meeting and agenda item out to all in advance. We will be looking probably at the end of April. We'll focus on probably after that school break week, just to avoid missing too many members. And then if anything comes up in the meantime, there's great links in the chat that I know people have stuck in there. We'll make sure to collect those and keep those in our meeting minutes so we can reference those for next time. And if there's any documents that people are aware of that can help facilitate this conversation further so that we can all come with some knowledge base, please feel free to send that along as well, and we'll make sure that's included. All right.
Thank you for those of us who don't keep track of chat. That's helpful to put them in the minutes. Thank you.
Yes, we will make sure to that. Thank you, Tom, for being here today and for sharing all that the work you're doing. And enjoy the nicer weather today, everybody.
Yeah. And before you take your walk, your homework assignment is to go to Advanced VT and check out that full website.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. This was great.
Thanks, folks.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
I get out of here.